Commander Jake Morrison walked slowly through the long glass corridors of Starbase Harvest. The station was huge, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Through the clear walls, he could see the green growing areas that stretched out like fingers from the main body of the station. Each section was full of plants growing in water instead of soil. The plants provided food for millions of people living on planets far from Earth. Jake had been running this station for 3 years now. He was not a soldier or a warrior. He was a farmer who had studied engineering. His job was to make sure the food production never stopped. The station grew enough vegetables, fruits, and grain to feed 12 different colony worlds. It was peaceful work, and Jake liked it that way. The morning started like any other morning. Jake checked the growing reports from each section. The tomatoes in Section 7 were doing well. The wheat in Section 12 was ready for harvest. The new potato experiment in Section 3 was showing good results. Everything was normal and quiet. Dr. Lisa Harper was working in the plant laboratory when the alarm started beeping. She was a small woman with short brown hair who knew more about plants than anyone else on the station. She had been trying to make corn grow faster using special chemicals. The corn was important because it could feed more people than other crops. Lisa looked at her computer screen and saw something that made her heart beat faster. The long-distance sensors were showing something moving toward them through space. It was big, and it was moving fast. She grabbed her datapad and ran toward the command center. Jake was drinking coffee and reading reports when Lisa ran into the room. Her face was white with fear, and she was breathing hard from running. "Jake, we have a serious problem," she said, holding up her datapad. "The sensors are showing a big fleet of ships coming toward us. They are not human ships." Jake put down his coffee cup and looked at the screen. The computer showed 12 large ships and many smaller ones. They were still far away, but they were moving directly toward Starbase Harvest. "Who are they?" Jake asked. "The computer says they are Zekthari ships," Lisa answered. "The Zekthari Empire has been taking over planets and space stations all across this part of the galaxy. They take everything they want and make slaves of the people they capture." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Zekthari were known for being cruel and violent. They had powerful weapons and strong shields on their ships. They never asked for surrender. They just took what they wanted. "How much time do we have?" Jake asked Lisa. Looked at her calculations again. "About 72 hours. Maybe less if they decide to move faster." Jake thought about their options. They could try to call for help, but the nearest military ships were at least 6 days away. They could try to run, but the station was too big and slow to escape. They could try to hide, but there was nowhere to hide in empty space. "What about the transport ships?" Jake asked. "Can we evacuate people?" Lisa shook her head. "We have only 4 transport ships. Each one can carry maybe 200 people. We have 8,000 people on this station. We cannot get everyone out in time." Jake walked to the big window that looked out into space. He could see the workers in the growing sections, taking care of the plants. They were farmers, scientists, engineers, and technicians. They were not soldiers. They had no weapons and no military training. But they were his people, and he would not abandon them. "Send a message to all department heads," Jake said. "Tell them to meet in the main conference room in 1 hour. We need to talk about how we are going to defend ourselves." Lisa looked surprised. "Defend ourselves?" "Jake, we are a farming station. We grow food, we do not fight wars." Jake turned back to her with a determined look on his face. "Then we will have to learn quickly. These people came here to work and build something good. I will not let some alien empire destroy what we have built." The conference room filled up with 25 people from different departments. There was Tony Rodriguez, the chief engineer who kept all the machines running. There was Dr. Paul Bennett, who studied alien life forms. There was Nancy Foster, who managed the food production. There was Dr. Carlos Martinez, who worked on plant genetics. There was Amy Chun, who handled communications with other stations and planets. Jake stood at the front of the room and explained the situation. The Zekthari fleet was coming, and they had less than 3 days to prepare. There would be no rescue, and there was no place to run, so what do we do? Asked Nancy Foster. She was an older woman who had been farming all her life. We have no guns, no missiles, no shields. How do we fight a war fleet? Tony Rodriguez raised his hand. Maybe we do not need traditional weapons. This station has powerful systems that we use for farming. We have high-pressure pumps that move water and nutrients through pipes. We have machines that can launch objects at high speed. We have chemicals that we use to help plants grow. Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. Tony is right. I have been working on plants that grow very fast. With the right modifications, we might be able to create something that could help us defend the station. Amy Chun looked worried. But we are not fighters. We are scientists and farmers. How can we possibly defeat trained soldiers with military weapons? Jake looked around the room at the faces of his people. They were scared, but they were also thinking. He could see the wheels turning in their minds as they considered the possibilities. We may not be soldiers, Jake said, but we are humans. Humans have survived by being creative and adapting to new situations. We have built this station using our intelligence and our ability to solve problems. Now we need to use those same skills to protect it. Dr. Bennett spoke up. The Zekthari are used to fighting other military forces. They expect weapons and shields and traditional space combat. They will not be expecting to fight against a farming station. Nancy smiled for the first time since the meeting started. We have something they probably have never seen before. We have thousands of tons of fertilizer. And anyone who has worked on a farm knows that fertilizer can be very dangerous if you know how to use it. Lisa looked at the group with growing excitement. We also have complete control over the station's life support systems. We can control air, water, temperature, and pressure in every section. If they try to board us, we can make things very uncomfortable for them. Jake felt hope beginning to grow in his chest. So we are agreed? We stay and fight? Everyone in the room nodded. They were scared, but they were also determined. They had built something good here, and they were not going to let it be destroyed without a fight. Then let's get to work, Jake said. We have 3 days to turn a farming station into a fortress. Tony, I want you to look at every system on this station and figure out how it can be used as a weapon. Dr. Martinez, see if you can modify your fast-growing plants to help with defense. Nancy, start working on ways to use our chemical supplies. Everyone else, think about your department and what resources we have that might help. As the meeting ended and people began to leave, Jake stood at the window again. The enemy fleet was still too far away to see, but he knew it was coming. In 3 days, they would find out if human creativity and determination could overcome superior firepower. Lisa walked up beside him. Do you really think we can do this? She asked. Jake looked at her and smiled. 3 days ago, if someone had told me we would be planning to fight a war fleet using farming equipment, I would have said they were crazy. But now I am starting to believe we might actually have a chance. Outside the window, the lights of the growing sections continued to shine and the plants continued to grow. Soon, those same systems might be humanity's last hope for survival. The next morning came too quickly for everyone on Starbase Harvest. Jake Morrison had not slept well. He kept thinking about the alien ships getting closer every hour. When he walked into the command center, he found Amy Chun already working at her station. She had been trying all night to contact the Zekthari fleet. Any luck with communications? Jake asked. Amy shook her head. Nothing. They are not responding to any of our messages. I have tried every frequency and every language in our database. They are just ignoring us completely. Jake was not surprised. The Zekthari had a reputation for not talking to their victims. They preferred to attack first and take what they wanted afterward. Dr. Lisa Harper entered the command center carrying a large cup of coffee and several data pads. She looked tired but determined. I have been working with the other department heads all night. We have some ideas that might actually work. Tony Rodriguez arrived a few minutes later, followed by Dr. Martinez and Nancy Foster. They all looked like they had been working instead of sleeping, But there was something different about them today. Yesterday they had been scared farmers and scientists. Today they looked like people who had a plan. "Let me show you what we discovered," Tony said, activating the main display screen. A three-dimensional image of the station appeared, showing all the different sections and systems. "This station has more potential weapons than we realized," Tony continued. "Look at the hydroponic systems. We use high-pressure pumps to move nutrient solution through thousands of pipes. Those pumps can generate incredible force. If we modify the nozzles and change the pressure settings, we can turn them into projectile launchers." Dr. Martinez stepped forward, "And I've been working on the biological weapons. The fast-growing vines I developed for the agriculture project can be modified to grow even faster. With the right genetic changes, they could grow fast enough to wrap around enemy ships and disable them," Nancy Foster smiled. "Do not forget about our chemical supplies. We have tons of nitrogen-based fertilizers that can be turned into explosives. We also have industrial acids that we use for cleaning the growing tanks. Those acids can eat through most metals, including the hull plating on spaceships." Jake looked at the display showing their station. For the first time since this crisis began, he felt like they might actually have a chance. "What about defenses? Can we protect ourselves from their weapons?" Lisa pointed to different sections of the station. "We can use the growing chambers as shelter areas. They have thick walls and independent life support systems. We can also release defensive spores into the air circulation system. Dr. Martinez has been working on spores that will make it very difficult for aliens to breathe our air." Amy Chun looked up from her communication station. "I have been monitoring their fleet. They are maintaining radio silence, but I can track their energy signatures. They will arrive in about 50 hours. Jake felt his heart rate increase. 50 hours was not very much time to turn a farming station into a fighting force. But his people seemed confident, and their ideas were starting to make sense. "What do we need to do first?" Jake asked. Tony pulled up another display. "We need to modify the pressure systems in sections 4 through 12. Those are our main growing areas, and they have the most powerful pumps. We can turn those sections into artillery positions." Dr. Martinez opened one of his data pads. "I need access to the genetic modification equipment in Laboratory 7. I can start growing the defensive plants right away, but they will need at least 30 hours to reach full size." Nancy Foster looked at her notes. "We need to start mixing the explosive compounds. The fertilizer needs to be processed and shaped into projectiles that will fit through the modified pump systems." Jake nodded. "Do it, all of it. What else do we need?" Dr. Paul Bennett, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "We need to know more about our enemy. I've been studying the Zekthari through our alien database. They are reptilian creatures who prefer warm, humid environments. They have excellent vision but poor hearing. Their ships are designed for conventional space combat, not for dealing with biological weapons." Amy Chun added, "Their fleet formation suggests they are planning a standard military assault. They will probably send fighter ships first to test our defenses, then follow up with their main attack force." Jake looked around the room at his team. "How long will it take to set up all these modifications?" Tony calculated quickly. "If we work in shifts around the clock, we can have the pressure systems modified in about 40 hours. That will give us maybe 10 hours to test everything before they arrive." Dr. Martinez nodded. "The biological weapons will be ready in 30 hours. I can start growing them in multiple locations, so we will have backup supplies." Nancy Foster looked worried. "The explosives will take longer. We need to be very careful when we mix them. One mistake could destroy part of the station." Jake made his decision. "We do not have time to be perfect. We just need to be good enough." Tony, start working on the pressure systems. Take anyone you need from the engineering department. Dr. Martinez, begin growing your defensive plants. Nancy, start with small batches of explosives so we can test them safely. As the meeting ended, people began to leave to start their work. But Jake called Dr. Bennett back. Paul, I need you to do something else. Start moving people from the outer sections into the inner areas of the station. If this turns into a boarding action, I want our civilians as far from the fighting as possible. Dr. Bennett nodded. I will start with the families and the non-essential personnel. But Jake, you should know that many people are volunteering to help fight. Even the farmers want to defend their crops. Jake felt a surge of pride. His people were not soldiers, but they were brave. Tell the volunteers they can help with the preparations. But when the fighting starts, I want them in the safe areas. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity. In Section 4, Tony Rodriguez and his engineering team worked day and night to modify the hydroponic systems. They removed the gentle spray nozzles and replaced them with high-pressure tubes that could launch projectiles. They rewired the control systems so the pumps could generate much more pressure than they were designed for. In the genetics laboratory, Dr. Martinez grew dozens of test plants. The modified vines grew so fast that they had to be kept in special containers to prevent them from taking over the entire lab. Each vine could grow several meters in just a few hours. When they were ready, they would be loaded into special pods that could be launched from the pressure systems. Nancy Foster worked in a specially ventilated area of the station, carefully mixing fertilizer compounds into explosive devices. She had to work slowly and carefully because the chemicals were very dangerous, but she was making progress. Her team had produced several hundred small, explosive devices that could be fired from the modified launchers. Amy Chun continued to monitor the approaching fleet. She gave regular updates on their position and speed. The Zectari ships were maintaining their course and speed, showing no signs that they knew about the preparations happening on the station. Dr. Bennett worked with the civilian population, moving families and non-essential workers to the safer intersections of the station. But many people refused to leave their posts. The farmers wanted to stay with their crops. The engineers wanted to help with the weapons. Even the cooks and cleaners wanted to contribute to the defense. Jake spent most of his time moving between different work areas, checking on progress, and solving problems. He was amazed by how quickly his people had adapted to this new situation. They were working together better than ever before. With 12 hours remaining before the enemy arrival, Jake called another meeting. This time the conference room was packed with people from every department. We are as ready as we can be, Jake announced. The pressure systems are modified and tested. The biological weapons are grown and ready for deployment. The explosives are prepared and loaded. Now we need to talk about tactics. Tony Rodriguez stood up. The modified systems in sections 4 through 12 can fire projectiles at very high speeds. We have tested them with practice rounds and they work well. Each section can fire about once every 2 minutes. Dr. Martinez reported next. The defensive vines are ready. When they make contact with enemy ships, they will begin growing immediately. They can wrap around hull sections and grow into ventilation systems. The aliens will not be able to cut them fast enough to stop them. Nancy Foster looked satisfied. We have enough explosive projectiles for about 30 minutes of continuous firing. After that, we will need to start making more during the battle. Jake looked around the room. Remember, we are not trying to win a traditional space battle. We are trying to survive long enough for help to arrive. Our advantages are surprise and creativity. They will not be expecting the kind of weapons we have prepared. Amy Chun raised her hand. What if they try to board the station? Jake had been thinking about this possibility. If they get close enough to board us, we will use the biological defenses. Dr. Martinez has prepared spores that will make it very difficult for them to breathe. We can also control the temperature and humidity. In different sections of the station, as the meeting ended, Jake felt nervous but confident. His people had worked miracles in just 2 days. The last 12 hours before the enemy arrived felt like the longest day of Jake Morrison's life. He walked through the station checking on final preparations. Everywhere he looked, he saw people working with tools and equipment that had never been designed for war. But they were making it work. In Section 4, Tony Rodriguez was running final tests on the modified pressure systems. The huge pumps that normally moved nutrient solution through the growing chambers now hummed with dangerous power. Instead of gentle spray nozzles, they had steel tubes that could launch projectiles at incredible speeds. How are they performing? Jake asked as he watched Tony adjust the pressure settings on a control panel. Better than I hoped, Tony replied with a tired smile. We can fire these projectiles at almost the same speed as a military railgun. The only problem is that we can only fire once every 2 minutes. The pumps need time to build up pressure. Again, Jake nodded. That will have to be enough. What about accuracy? Tony pointed to a target they had set up in the empty space near the station. We have been practicing with dummy rounds. At close range, we can hit what we aim at. At long range, it gets more difficult. But remember, we are not trying to hit small targets. We are shooting at big spaceships. In the genetics laboratory, Dr. Martinez was preparing the final batch of biological weapons. The modified vines had grown into thick, green masses that moved slightly even when no one was touching them. Each vine was about as thick as a person's arm and could grow several meters in just minutes. These plants are unlike anything that has ever existed before, Dr. Martinez explained as he carefully loaded the vines into special launching pods. They are programmed to seek out metal and wrap around it. Once they make contact with a spaceship, they will begin growing into every crack and opening they can find. Dr. Lisa Harper was helping him prepare the pods. What happens if they get inside the enemy ships? They will continue growing, Dr. Martinez answered. They will block air vents, wrap around control panels, and generally make it impossible for the ship to function normally. The aliens will have to cut them away, but they grow faster than most people can cut. Jake was impressed by how calm Dr. Martinez seemed. The quiet scientist had become one of their most important weapons experts. How many pods do we have ready? 250, Dr. Martinez replied. Each pod contains enough vine material to disable a small ship. For larger ships, we will need to use multiple pods. In the chemical preparation area, Nancy Foster was finishing the last batch of explosive projectiles. She worked carefully, mixing the fertilizer compounds with other chemicals to create small but powerful bombs. Each explosive device was about the size of a basketball and could punch a hole through thick metal. These are not as powerful as military explosives, Nancy explained to Jake, but they will do the job. The fertilizer compounds burn very hot and very fast. They should be able to damage enemy ship hulls and disable their weapons. Jake looked at the rows of explosive devices lined up on the work tables. How many do we have? About 600, Nancy answered. That should be enough for the first wave of attacks. If the battle lasts longer, we will need to make more during the fighting. Amy Chun was still monitoring the approaching enemy fleet from the communication center. She had not slept in over 20 hours, but she refused to leave her post. The screens around her showed the positions of all the enemy ships. They are still maintaining formation, she reported to Jake. 12 large ships and about 50 smaller ones. They will be in weapons range in about 6 hours. Jake studied the display. The enemy ships were spread out in a pattern that suggested they were planning a coordinated attack. Any change in their behavior? No, Amy replied. They are still not responding to our communication attempts. They seem to be treating this as a routine military operation. Jake felt a grim satisfaction. The aliens had no idea what was waiting for them. They were expecting to attack a defenseless farming station. Instead, they were going to encounter something completely unexpected. Dr. Paul Bennett had been working with the civilian population to prepare the intersections of the station for a possible siege. Families with children were moved to the safest areas, far from the outer hull where the fighting would likely occur. Most of the non-essential personnel are in the protected zones, Dr. Bennett reported to Jake. But we still have about 200 people who refuse to leave their posts. They want to help with the defense. Jake was not surprised. His people had shown incredible courage during the preparation phase. What kind of help can they provide? Many. of them know the station systems better than anyone, Dr. Bennett explained. They can help with damage control, emergency repairs, and resupply operations. Some of the maintenance workers want to help Nancy Foster make more explosives during the battle. Jake made a decision. Let them help, but keep them away from the actual fighting positions. We will need all the help we can get. As the final hours passed, Jake visited each section of the station one more time. In Section 7, he found a group of farmers loading vine pods into the modified launchers. These were people who normally spent their days caring for tomatoes and corn. Now they were preparing biological weapons for space combat. Are you ready for this? Jake asked one of the farmers, an older man named Bill who had been growing food for 30 years. Bill looked up from the pod he was loading. Commander, I have been growing things all my life. I never thought I would be growing weapons, but if that is what it takes to protect our home, then that is what we will do. In Section 9, Jake found a team of engineers making final adjustments to the pressure systems. They had painted targeting information on the walls and set up communication lines so they could coordinate their attacks. We are as ready as we can be, one of the engineers told Jake. These systems were never designed for this kind of work, but we have made them as reliable as possible. Jake felt proud of what his people had accomplished. In just 3 days, they had transformed a peaceful farming station into something that could fight back against a military fleet. It might not be enough to win, but it would certainly surprise the enemy. With 3 hours remaining before the enemy arrival, Jake called his department heads together for a final strategy meeting. They gathered in the command center, surrounded by screens showing the station systems and the approaching enemy fleet. This is it, Jake announced. In 3 hours, we will find out if our preparations have been enough. I want everyone to remember that we are not trying to win a conventional space battle. We are trying to survive long enough for help to arrive. Tony Rodriguez looked at the tactical display. The enemy fighters will probably attack first. They will try to destroy our outer defenses and test our capabilities. We should focus our initial attacks on the smaller ships. Dr. Martinez nodded. The biological weapons will be most effective against ships that get close to the station. We should save them for the second wave of attacks. Nancy Foster studied the enemy formation. The explosive projectiles have the longest range. We should use them to attack the large ships while they are still far away. Amy Chun looked up from her communication station. I will continue monitoring their communications. If they start talking to each other, we might be able to learn something about their tactics. Jake looked around at his team. These were not soldiers or military officers. They were farmers, scientists, and engineers who had volunteered to defend their home. But they had worked together to create something remarkable. Remember, Jake said, we have advantages that the enemy does not expect. Our weapons are completely different from anything they have encountered before. They will not know how to defend against biological attacks or explosive fertilizer. Dr. Bennett spoke up. What if they try to negotiate or demand our surrender? Jake had been thinking about this possibility. We will not surrender. Too many people have worked too hard to give up now. Besides, the Zekthari are not known for being merciful to their prisoners. As the meeting ended, Jake walked to the observation deck one final time. Through the transparent walls, he could see the stars in the distance. Somewhere out there, the enemy fleet was approaching. Soon, those stars would be filled with the light of weapons fire and exploding ships, but Jake was no longer afraid. His people had proven that human creativity and determination could overcome any challenge. They had turned farming equipment into weapons, plants into defensive systems, and fertilizer into explosives. Whatever happened in the next few hours, they would face it together. The battle for Starbase Harvest was about to begin. The Zekthari fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly when Amy Chun had predicted. Jake Morrison stood in the command center watching the enemy ships appear on the main display screen. 12 massive warships and 50 smaller fighters spread out in attack formation. They looked like deadly metal sharks preparing to feed. Admiral Kresh commanded the Zekthari fleet from his flagship, a ship 3 times larger than any human vessel. He was a tall reptilian creature with dark green scales and cold yellow eyes. He had conquered 17 star systems for the Empire and had never lost a battle. "Target analysis complete," reported his tactical officer, a younger Zekthari with bright red markings on his neck. "The structure appears to be an agricultural facility. No significant weapons detected. No military shields. This should be a simple conquest." Admiral Kresh studied the strange spinning station on his viewscreen. It was much larger than he had expected, but it looked peaceful. The long arms extending from the central hub were clearly designed for growing food, not fighting wars. "Begin." "Standard intimidation protocol," Admiral Kresh ordered. "Demand their surrender. When they refuse, we will demonstrate our power by destroying one of their growing sections." On Starbase Harvest, Jake watched the enemy ships take their positions. The largest ships stayed far away while the smaller fighters moved closer. It was exactly what Tony Rodriguez had predicted. "All stations, this is Commander Morrison," Jake announced over the station-wide communication system. "The enemy has arrived. Remember what we have practiced. We are not soldiers, but today we fight like farmers defending our harvest. Show them what human creativity can do." Amy Chun received the first communication from the enemy fleet. The message was simple and brutal. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. There would be no negotiation. "Send them our answer," Jake told Amy. Amy transmitted a short reply. "Starbase Harvest does not surrender to invaders. If you want our station, you will have to take it." Admiral Kresh was not surprised by the human response. Most species tried to resist at first. Send in the first fighter wave. Destroy their outer growing sections. Show them what happens when they refuse our generous offer. 20 Zekthari fighters accelerated toward the station. Their pilots were confident and relaxed. They had destroyed many space stations before. This would be easy work, but as the fighters approached Starbase Harvest, something unexpected happened. The space around the station suddenly filled with clouds of strange particles. The particles looked like tiny seeds or spores floating in the vacuum. "What is this?" asked one of the fighter pilots over the communication channel. "Some kind of defensive chaff," replied another pilot. "Ignore it and continue the attack." But the particles were not chaff. They were Dr. Martinez's modified spores, designed to eat through alien metal. As the fighters flew through the clouds, the spores began sticking to their hulls and immediately started their destructive work. The first sign of trouble came when Fighter 7 reported engine problems. "My thrust is dropping," the pilot reported. "Something is wrong with the engine intake." Then Fighter 12 lost weapon power. "My laser batteries are not responding," the pilot said with growing concern. Within minutes, half of the first fighter wave was reporting system failures. The modified spores were eating through their hull plating, getting into their engines, and damaging their control systems. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported with confusion in his voice, "our fighters are experiencing widespread equipment failures. They say something is eating their ships?" Admiral Kresh felt his first moment of doubt. "Eating their ships? That is impossible. Biological weapons cannot survive in space." But the evidence was clear on his screens. Fighter after fighter was reporting critical damage. Some were losing power completely. Others were spinning out of control as their navigation systems failed. Jake watched the enemy fighters struggling with their equipment problems and felt a surge of hope. "Dr. Martinez, your spores are working perfectly." Dr. Martinez was monitoring the biological weapon deployment from the genetics laboratory. "The spores are performing better than I expected. They are reproducing quickly in the vacuum and spreading to additional ships." Tony Rodriguez was ready with the next phase of the defense. "Commander, the fighters are close enough for the pressure systems. Should we begin firing?" "Yes," Jake replied. "All sections begin firing explosive projectiles." The modified pressure systems in sections 4 through 12 activated simultaneously. The powerful pumps that normally moved water through the growing chambers now launched Nancy Foster's explosive devices at incredible speed. The first volley of organic explosives struck the damaged fighter ships with devastating force. The fertilizer compounds burned through their weakened hulls like acid through paper. Fighter 9 exploded completely when an explosive device penetrated its fuel tank. Impossible! Admiral Kresh shouted as he watched his fighters being destroyed by unknown weapons. What kind of armament are they using? His tactical officer was studying the sensor readings with growing amazement. Sir, the projectiles appear to be organic in nature. The energy signatures suggest some kind of chemical explosive, but unlike anything in our database, fighter after fighter was eliminated by the combination of biological corrosion and explosive impacts. Within 30 minutes, the entire first wave had been destroyed or disabled. The few surviving pilots reported that their ships were being consumed by some kind of living organism. Jake could hardly believe what he was seeing. Their improvised weapons were actually working. Amy, what is the enemy fleet doing? Amy Chun studied her sensor readings. The main fleet is holding position, but they are launching a second wave of fighters. This group is much larger. About 30 ships? Jake knew that 30 fighters would be much more difficult to handle than 20. Dr. Martinez, do we have more spores ready? Yes, but we should save them for closer targets. The spores work best at short range. Tony Rodriguez checked his ammunition supplies. We have used about 100 explosive projectiles. We still have 500 remaining. Jake made his decision. Wait until the fighters get closer, then hit them with everything we have. The second wave of Zek-3 fighters approached more carefully. They had heard the reports from the first wave and knew that something unusual was happening. But they were still confident that they could overwhelm the station's defenses. Admiral Kresh was beginning to feel frustrated. How can a farming station destroy military fighters? There must be hidden weapons we are not detecting. Sir, his tactical officer reported. The second wave is reporting similar problems. Their ships are being affected by some kind of corrosive agent. This time, Jake waited until the enemy fighters were very close before releasing the spores. Dr. Martinez had prepared an even stronger batch that worked faster than the first deployment. The results were immediate and dramatic. Fighter after fighter lost power as the biological agents ate through their systems. Some pilots tried to retreat, but their engines failed before they could escape. Then Tony Rodriguez opened fire with all 12 pressure systems simultaneously. The explosive projectiles struck the disabled fighters with overwhelming force. The damaged ships had no way to defend themselves against the organic explosives. Nancy Foster watched the battle from the chemical preparation area where she was making more explosive devices. Commander, our ammunition is working better than expected. The fertilizer compounds are burning much hotter in the vacuum of space. Jake felt a growing sense of amazement. They were actually winning. A farming station was defeating a military fleet using nothing but agricultural equipment and modified plants, but Admiral Kresh was not finished. He had lost almost all of his fighters, but he still had his main battle fleet. Enough of this foolishness, he growled. All ships advance to close range. Use main weapons to destroy this station completely. The 12 massive Zek-3 warships began moving toward Starbase Harvest. Each ship was heavily armed and armored. They would be much more difficult to defeat than the smaller fighters. Jake knew that the real battle was just beginning. All stations prepare for the main assault. This is where we find out if we can really defend our home. Dr. Martinez was ready with his most powerful biological weapons. Commander, I have been saving the best for last. The vine pods are ready for deployment. Tony Rodriguez checked his systems. The pressure launchers are ready for continuous fire. Nancy Foster reported from the chemical area. We have enough explosives for extended combat. Jake looked at his people and felt proud of what they had accomplished. They had already proven that human ingenuity could overcome superior technology. Now they would find out if it could overcome superior numbers as well. The battle for Starbase Harvest was about to reach its climax. The 12 massive Zek-3 warships approached the Starbase harvest like giant predators closing in on their prey. Admiral Kresh stood on the bridge of his flagship, his yellow eyes burning with anger. He had lost nearly all of his fighters to a farming station, and his reputation was at stake. "All ships target the central hub of the station," Admiral Kresh commanded. "Use maximum firepower. I want this embarrassing defeat erased from existence." The warships opened fire with their main weapons. Beams of energy and streams of plasma shot toward the station, but Jake Morrison and his people were ready. "Emergency maneuvers," Jake ordered from the command center. "Use the rotation systems to present our smallest profile to their weapons." Tony Rodriguez had prepared for this moment. The station's rotation could be controlled to make it harder for the enemy to hit vital areas. As the massive structure turned, most of the enemy fire struck the heavily armored outer sections instead of the vulnerable central hub. "Dr. Martinez, deploy the vine pods now," Jake commanded. Dr. Martinez activated the biological weapon systems. 250 pods launched from the modified pressure systems, each one containing his most advanced plant creation. The pods spread out in all directions, seeking the enemy ships. The Zek-3 had never seen anything like it. The pods looked harmless as they drifted through space, but when they made contact with the warship hulls, something incredible happened. "Sir, we have multiple impacts on the hull," reported the tactical officer on Admiral Kresh's flagship. "But the objects appear to be some kind of plant material." Admiral Kresh was confused. "Plants in space? That is impossible." But even as he spoke, the vine pods were splitting open and releasing their contents. Dr. Martinez's super-fast-growing vines immediately began expanding across the hull of each ship they touched. The plants had been genetically modified to seek out metal and grow into any opening they could find. Within minutes, thick green vines were wrapping around weapons turrets, crawling into exhaust ports, and spreading across sensor arrays. The vines grew so fast that the Zek-3 crews could not cut them away quickly enough. "Our main weapons are being blocked," reported the captain of the Zek-3 ship Thunderclaw. "These plants are growing over our gun barrels." "Our sensors are failing," reported another ship. "The vines are covering our detection equipment." Admiral Kresh watched in horror as his mighty fleet was being strangled by alien plants. "Use cutting tools, use fire. Use whatever you need to remove these organisms." But the vines were designed to be almost impossible to destroy. They grew faster than they could be cut, and they were resistant to heat and chemicals. Worse yet, they were programmed to grow into the ships through any opening they could find. On the warship Bloodfang, vines began growing through the air circulation system. The thick green tendrils spread through the corridors, blocking doorways and wrapping around control panels. The crew found themselves fighting a plant that seemed to be everywhere at once. Jake watched the battle with growing amazement. "Tony, how are our ammunition supplies?" "We still have plenty of explosive projectiles," Tony replied. "The vine attack is working so well that we have not needed to use many explosives yet." Nancy Foster was monitoring the chemical weapons from her preparation area. "Commander, the biological attack is exceeding all expectations. The enemy ships are being disabled faster than we thought possible." Amy Chun looked up from her communication station with excitement. "I am intercepting enemy communications. They are reporting complete system failures across their entire fleet. Some ships are losing life support as the vines block their air systems." Dr. Martinez was watching his creation work with scientific fascination. The vines are not just growing on the outside of the ships, they are getting inside and disrupting everything. The aliens cannot stop them because they grow too fast. Admiral Kresh was beginning to panic. Half of his fleet was already disabled by the strange plant attack. His own ship was covered with thick vines that were slowly crushing his weapon systems. "All ships attempt to retreat," he ordered. "We cannot fight an enemy that uses impossible weapons." But it was too late for most of his fleet. The vines had grown so extensively that many ships could no longer maneuver properly. Their engines were blocked, their weapons were covered, and their crews were trapped inside by plant growth. Jake saw his opportunity. All sections begin firing explosive projectiles at the disabled ships. Finish them off while they cannot fight. Back, the modified pressure systems opened fire with Nancy Foster's organic explosives. The fertilizer-based weapons struck the vine-covered ships with devastating effect. The explosions not only damaged the ships but also spread burning plant material across their hulls, one by one. The mighty HFY warships were destroyed or disabled. The Thunderclaw exploded when vines grew into its reactor core. The blood? Fang lost all power when plants blocked its energy distribution system. The Death Strike began spinning helplessly when vines wrapped around its steering thrusters. Admiral Kresh watched his fleet being destroyed by farming equipment and felt something he had never experienced before: complete defeat. His flagship was the only ship still capable of fighting, but it too was being slowly consumed by the alien plants. "Sir, we must retreat," his tactical officer urged. "We cannot win this battle." Admiral Kresh looked at the farming station that had destroyed his fleet. How could this be possible? How could farmers defeat trained warriors? How could plants destroy warships? "Send a retreat signal to any ships that can still receive it," he ordered with bitter anger. "We are withdrawing from this cursed place." The few HFY ships that were still capable of movement began limping away from Starbase Harvest. They left behind the wreckage of nearly their entire fleet, covered in strange alien vines that continued to grow even on the destroyed ships. Jake stood in the command center, hardly believing what had happened. They had won. A farming station had defeated a military fleet using nothing but agricultural equipment, modified plants, and human creativity. "Amy, send a message to the nearest human fleet," Jake ordered. "Tell them that Starbase Harvest has successfully repelled a HFY invasion." Dr. Lisa Harper joined Jake at the main view screen, looking out at the debris field that had once been a mighty alien fleet. "I cannot believe we actually did it," she said with wonder in her voice. "Tony." Rodriguez was already thinking about repairs and improvements. "Commander, we should study the battle data and see how we can make our defenses even better. Other stations might need to defend themselves too." Dr. Martinez was examining samples of his vines that had been recovered from destroyed enemy ships. "These plants exceeded every prediction I made. They adapted to the alien technology in ways I never expected." Nancy Foster was already planning the next batch of explosive devices. "We should make more ammunition and train other agricultural stations in these techniques. The galaxy is a dangerous place." Jake looked around at his people with enormous pride. They had started as farmers, scientists, and engineers. They had become something more: defenders of humanity who had proven that creative thinking could overcome any challenge. "Dr. Bennett, what is the status of our civilian population?" Jake asked. Dr. Paul Bennett smiled. "Everyone is safe and celebrating. The word is spreading through the station that we won the battle. People are calling it the Harvest Victory." Amy Chun looked up from her communication station. "Commander, I am receiving messages from other human colonies. News of our victory is spreading quickly. They want to know how we defeated a HFY fleet." Jake thought about the implications of their victory. Other colonies and stations would want to learn their techniques. The methods they had developed could be used to defend human settlements throughout the galaxy. "We will share everything we learned," Jake decided. Every human colony should know how to turn their peaceful equipment into defensive weapons. As the hours passed, rescue ships began arriving from nearby human territories. But they found that rescue was not needed. Starbase Harvest had saved itself. The story of the farming station that defeated a war fleet spread throughout human space and beyond. It became proof that human creativity and determination could overcome any odds. The HFY Empire, meanwhile, issued new warnings to their fleets about attacking human agricultural installations. On Starbase Harvest, life slowly returned to normal. The vine weapons were carefully removed and stored for future emergencies. The explosive production equipment was converted back to fertilizer manufacturing. The pressure systems returned to their peaceful work of growing food, but everyone who had lived through those 3 days knew that they had participated in something extraordinary. They had proven that humans could defend themselves using nothing but their intelligence. Their courage and their refusal to give up. Jake Morrison continued to command the station, but now he was known throughout the galaxy as the farmer who defeated an alien fleet. Dr. Martinez became famous for his biological weapons research. Tony Rodriguez was recognized as an engineering genius who could turn any machine into a weapon, and in the growing chambers of Starbase Harvest, a small vine grew in a special container. It was one of Dr. Martinez's original defensive plants,